We're going to kick the new year off with a really exciting guest. This is really going to be fun. And because Compel Don't Sell is an ongoing life experience, I invited Zipporah Kingsbury onto the show so that she can share how she feels and teaches about relationships and business. So welcome, Zipporah. I'm so glad you're here with us.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm excited for our conversation.
Me too, and we've been looking forward to it for a long time because I specialed Zipporah in our Massive Visibility Entrepreneurs Group for the month of December. So she got an opportunity to advertise herself all month on that in that community. And she also wrote a blog, which I'll be posting very soon. And she gets this interview. So it's really an honor to be chosen. And a lot of it's based on participation in the group and how they interact with others. So Zipporah, tell us a little bit about you. I'm very anxious to hear your background and how you got to where you are today.
Wow. So I get the opportunity, I have for nearly 2 decades, of traveling globally around the world as an international master facilitator, an innovator in the realms of intimacy and relationship. So you might say that my passion is really cultivating change in the way that we relate from the bedroom to the boardroom.
How long have you been doing this?
I've been doing this for 2 decades, and I tell you, it's a constant evolution, right? It's never stayed the same. It's constantly grown like a garden. Yeah.
And that's what we love about our businesses, right? They're always changing. Otherwise, we'd get a job and do the same thing every day, right?
Yeah, and it's right. It's the same thing. It's a relationship, right? The relationship we have with our business. And if I were to hold on to it tightly, it would suffocate. And so it's meant to grow and evolve. And that way we can serve people in the best and highest of ways.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. So we have Compel Don't Sell coming up, and that's the 2-day intensive. And one of the things I really want you to discuss with us is relationship and how to build that relationship. How would you say that my students should go out and connect with people so that they can start building relationship and trust right away?
First thing that comes to mind is different than going out and building a relationship, because most people lack the quality of relationship with themselves. Most people lack this place of living from what I call emotional intelligence, where they're really owning their feelings. They really know their own personal boundaries, and they know their own needs and feelings. So the number one thing I would suggest is actually going inward and doing the radical work on themselves so they can show up differently when they go out to build those relationships. So they actually have the energy and the capacity and the presence and the authenticity to do so.
Oh, I love that, because I teach them about authenticity. That's so important, because if it isn't coming from within, how does it show anybody? We have that guarded wall up, right?
Yes, yeah. And I believe, we're entering into an age of very heart-centered leadership, and where there's more compassion. And there's the word that I'm loving is inspiration, right? We inspire when we come from that place of authenticity versus the old way, which is fear-based and very forceful.
Mm-hmm. I know exactly what you're talking about. And a lot of the world is still in that fear-based genre, right? I mean, they really need to sit back and look at who they are, actually look in the mirror, as I like to say.
Yeah. It's interesting, 2 sides of the coin, right? Where many of us are doing that work to show up differently. And then if we go into the world and we meet up against, like you said, that mirror, who maybe hasn't been doing as much of the work and is still stuck in the fear and their own challenges, how can we, the people who are doing the work, actually show up present rather than in judgment of those and really make more conscious choices?
Man, that's an excellent point. Judgment. Oh, would you go into judgment a little bit before we move forward? Because I know a lot of my students are judging people before they even get a chance to talk to them. They'll judge them based on their clothing. Oh, they don't have enough money, or, oh, they don't want to talk to me. They don't look like they're very friendly. How do they overcome that judgment piece?
What just came to me was, we enter, especially with all the business groups, right? And we have the networking groups, we enter into that space with all of our own baggage, right? And our preconceived thoughts and notions. And that's where our judgments come from, that someone else makes us feel uncomfortable, maybe because of what they're wearing or the way they're talking. Whereas again, it comes back to ownership. Can we realize that those are our feelings and really recognize that each person, yes, they're business owners and entrepreneurs, but they're human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important as business owners to remember that we are all simply human beings. And for me, that helps me come deeper into a place of compassion.
Actually, we're human beings doing the very best that we can in that moment, right?
Yes, we are.
Yes. And people learn over time, and we're not all perfect, and we're not all just like ourselves, right? Can you imagine what it'd be like if we walked around like ourselves?
It's kind of scary.
It was just like us. What a bore. Where would you say people need to begin?
To start to uncover where they have allowed their own boundaries to be crossed. Okay?
Yes.
We tend to judge because we're triggered, but the only reason we're triggered is because we've allowed, at some point in life, it may not be that particular experience, we've allowed a boundary to be crossed. And this is again where we think as business owners, or even when we talk about heart-centeredness, that we think we have to just let everyone do whatever they want. But no, it's honing in what are your boundaries and where have you allowed them to be crossed. So self-reflection, just get out a journal, self-reflect, and be radically honest about your boundaries.
I love that. Where have we allowed other people into our boundary field or past our boundary field? And then where did that come from? That would be so easy, maybe easy for some, to go back to and really look at that boundary. And then what do they do when they found out that they did let that boundary be crossed?
I always like to start with understanding ourselves, right? Because then it allows us to understand others. So when I found out, if I investigate and notice I have let a boundary be crossed, I'd be like, okay, so why did I do that? What was I trying to get? Mm-hmm. I was afraid that this person wouldn't like me, or I wanted the whole room to pay attention to me. So I would ask myself and get to understand why that part of me made that decision.
Or I wanted the sale, right?
Or I wanted the sale and nothing else mattered.
Yes, nothing else mattered. I was willing to do anything to get the sale. Yeah. And those, or they cancel, or they get mad at you for no reason whatsoever.
One of the things I love to say is, and I think you'd resonate with this, is that true success is actually fulfillment. And at the end of the day, if I've stepped away from my core values, my spirit and my heart aren't happy, it happens in those moments, right? The boundaries are crossed. All we cared about was making the sale, and we stepped away from truly what was a value of ours. And that's not worth it.
And I talk to my students also about when they focus on their perfect client, who is it exactly that they want to work with? And then they step outside that pinpointed boundary, then suddenly they're working with someone that doesn't fit into their program.
Yes, yes. What just came to me are a few words. Is that place where, again, we were run by fear, and it creates force, which creates these choices. Or we have the opposite. Can we actually stay tuned into running off of passion and our pleasure, and following that place of pleasure, which is those clients that actually fuel us and excite us.
Absolutely. Good point. Excellent point. And there's nothing we love more than clients who fuel us, because then we give them so much better service than we would have otherwise. So if we step outside and we don't stay within our boundaries, suddenly we're working with people we never wanted to work with in the first place.
Yes. And, people who potentially aren't ready.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are actually, I've been there. It's like thinking I want to save the world and I'm doing people, I'm benefiting people. But if that person is not ready, I'm actually doing them more harm than good.
Absolutely. Great point. Great point. So say you take on a client, and of course it's the wrong client for this example, and it goes crossways, and they happen to be in your community. What is the best thing to do? How do you overcome that? How do you resolve that in a relationship like that?
Now you're speaking client with client, correct?
Yeah, a client or something. It could be a client, or you could give me two good examples about something that just goes wrong out in the business world. I mean, take your pick. It's up to you.
I'm going to start with, I'll give you two, but I'm going to start with the client. And first thing always that we must remember is that when we're working with the client, we are the ones in responsibility. We are the ones holding the space. So no matter what happens with that, again, we're the ones that actually need to step up in a bigger way. And so if there's something that comes to play, say for example, a client is not following through on their homework, they're missing appointments, they're not notifying you that they want to cancel, and you're just recognizing you're getting agitated and judgments start to move. Yeah. Number one, again, this is that time, self-responsibility, check in with yourself. Remember, you're the guide, you're the facilitator here. Number two, where are your business boundaries? Number three is please cultivate compassionate communication. And in this moment, you should have those skills to be able to compassionately communicate with this client in a loving way, but being clear on, wow, I'm noticing when you signed up for this program, this was your agreement and your commitment. And I'm noticing that there's a lack of follow through. Mm-hmm. And I'm recognizing that I don't feel we are a match to work together anymore. May I pass you on to someone else? So that was me being really clear with this person, mm-hmm. cutting the cord. And then they might have their emotional stuff come up, but in that moment, I knew that I was clear through the whole process. Afterwards, if you see this person like in an event, mm-hmm. I guarantee if you take those steps like I just went through, there's going to be greater ease there rather than separation. There might be a little bit of uncomfortability, but there's not going to be that war that so often happens.
Yeah, and that running off and talking about it to everybody, that's the biggest thing when you're in a community. Oh, she did this and he did that or whatever. Yeah.
And that's the thing, when we move from that place of really clear, like my boundaries, my values, clear communication, taking ownership, and then being authentic, you know what? There actually becomes no more room in a community to talk behind people's backs because there's nothing left to talk about anymore.
Right. And another way to really alleviate that is to have an agreement up front so that they know exactly what they're going to get in your program. That's a big thing. And so many times I've taken programs and we're just running off willy-nilly and I have no idea where I'm going or how I'm going to get there. I'll just give you an example. Early on in my training days for putting on a show for WMAX TV, I had a person that was training me and she wanted $2,000 here and another $1,000 there and another $500 here, but I never had any agreement from her as to what this money was for. Or where we were going with it. And then I could never nail it down on the phone either. And I'm a person that needs to have agreement, but I really wanted to learn how to put on my show. And it was very, very frustrating. And in the end, I never could get an agreement. I never got the service. And so I had to take extra steps to get my money back. Agreement up front is huge. Would you agree?
I'm like nodding my head. Yeah, like even in personal relationships, we have agreements.
Right.
Yes, agreement, be clear, have it on paper, have it signed, have a conversation about it. Mm-hmm. Make sure we're both in agreement with it. If not, where does it need to change a little bit? But yes, absolutely, clarity in agreement.
And even a guarantee helps a lot too. I mean, that helps build trust so quickly, don't you think?
It does. And I think it's interesting because where I went with that is in this new age of relating, whether that's business or personal, I feel it takes agreement on both sides, because if a client's going through, for example, when I work with people, I go into really deep emotional work and repatterning work. Mm-hmm. So there needs to be a strong commitment for the client, because often what can happen if they go into those dark abyss, all their stuff can come up and then they'll try to run in the other direction. So clear on both sides.
Yes, makes perfect sense. And I love what you said about, working it out and being clear about where you stand as the facilitator in your courses. I think that was just phenomenally put. And those of you who are watching this, if you get into this channel of challenge, then come back and listen to this video, because Zipporah gave you a really good tip there about how to handle that kind of thing. We can't run away from our responsibility either. We are to give our all, and know that every time you work with somebody, they take a small piece of you away with them, because that's how they learned. So Zipporah, tell me, if a person's going out and they've already looked in the mirror, they already know who they are, and they've got their visual suit of armor on, and they're not having any problem with rejection, and they're not afraid to talk to people, what do you think is the best way to introduce yourself to someone out of the clear blue that you've never met before?
I always love starting with asking questions. Mm-hmm. When I approach someone, especially in the business world, and there's two ways. If I approach someone and I instantly start talking about me, it can be a turnoff, and it becomes more like a border that we can't open. But if I walk up to that person, like you just said, in my confidence and my clarity, clear, and I'm just like, tell me something about you. If I ask, what's alive for you today? Tell me one thing that you've successfully done today. Like get really curious, right? Because these communities of business owners, to me, number one, is about cultivating relationships. Mm-hmm. And I think we miss the mark on that most often. So ask them a question, and that's going to open the door that they're going to want to come into you. And now they're going to be curious as well about you.
Awesome. That was awesome. That's exactly what I teach. So I love what you said. Boy, are we on the same page.
Yay.
Because, it's so important that we show interest in someone else, because so many people in those networking groups are trying to sell. They're just like, oh, have you heard about my product? I want to talk about my product. Hammer, 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 hammer. And it makes people want to run the other way. Simple. I don't even want to put up with it. And once they start with me, I'll always say, so tell me about you. And they're like, what? It's like you wake them up out of their Walking Dead sleep, because they're not prepared to say anything about themselves, fully about what they're doing in business.
Correct. And I would invite in, if it's new for you to do stuff like this, make a list of 5 questions before you walk through that door. 5 questions that are personal. Mm-hmm. Like I would totally make it personal. get very specific so that person you're asking actually can hone right in on that answer, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Great idea. 5 questions.
Yeah.
So, Zipporah, I have loved being with you today. Tell me about what you are doing. What is your big accomplishment that you're so very proud of?
I would say what's alive for me in this moment is, having a new book that's going to be published in a few months, just having one book published. So right now, that's what's very alive for me, to bring the core basis of my work and my passion out into the world that more people can receive it.
Awesome. Wonderful. And then tell me what you're doing in the world to make the world a better place.
Goodness, it's 2017. I'm so excited.
Yes.
So I've just launched my 2017 Soulful Relating Personal and Professional Mentorship Programs. This year, they are actually being up-leveled and going to be turned into all online courses as well, to reach out to more global communities with this work around changing the way we relate in the world.
And I want to thank you so much for being with me today. You're just such a pleasure to have on my show, and it's just wonderful to see you and see what you're doing in the world. It's just amazing. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It was so wonderful to be here. Can I offer a gift to the listeners?
Sure, would you?
I have 5 spaces open for 30-minute complimentary Soulful Relating consultations this month. And they can find that at my website at soulfulrelatinginstitute.com.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Love you all, and Happy New Year.